Here's a very famous poem by the poet Ezra Pound. It's titled In a Station of the Metro. The apparition of these faces in the crowd, petals on a wet black bough. That's it. That's the whole poem. When I show this to students, I usually get some fun reactions. There are other kinds of poetry we've looked at this year, like free verse that challenges students' assumptions about what poetry is, but nothing like this. How can two lines be a poem? Now, even though the poem itself is very short, Ezra Pound had a lot to say about it that I think helps to explain what Imagist poetry is all about. Here's his account of how this poem came to be. He said, 3 years ago, in Paris, I got out of a metro train at La Concorde and saw suddenly a beautiful face, and then another, and another, and then a beautiful child's face, and then another beautiful woman, and I tried all that day to find words for what this had meant to me, and I could not find any words that seemed to me worthy or as lovely as that sudden emotion. Now, I think we've all had that experience before of having some kind of a feeling or emotion in the moment that we can't precisely put into words. Now, Ezra Pound goes on and he says, I wrote a 30-line poem and destroyed it because it was what we call work of second intensity. 6 months later, I made a poem half that length. A year later, I made the following haiku like sentence. The apparition of these faces in the crowd, petals on a wet black bough. Now, in that explanation, there are two key ideas for me. I love that he started with a 30-line poem, and then the process of revision was all of subtraction, of taking away anything that was not needed until all he had left was that single essential image. The second key idea is his mention of haiku, because that is probably the primary influence behind what we call in America Imagist poetry. Now, I'm sure you were taught about haiku poetry when you were younger. I think that what most people take away from that is the three-line structure with a limit on how many syllables you have per line, 5, 7, and then 5. But I think focusing on those things is missing a bit of the point of haiku. Haiku is really about capturing an image, a moment frozen in time, with the simplest language possible. In explaining Imagism, Ezra Pound tells a story of a Japanese naval officer walking with an American. A cat crossed the path, and the officer said, Stop, I'm making a poem. And the poem he composed in the moment was this: The footsteps of the cat upon the snow, plum blossoms. Now, if you can understand that idea of taking a fleeting moment in life, a seemingly indescribable feeling, and trying to put words to that single idea or image, then you understand Imagism. Now, let's look at some examples from the American poet William Carlos Williams. The Red Wheelbarrow. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. Now, in my introduction to T.S. Eliot, I shared with you that when I was in high school, I did not think that I understood poetry. And I vividly remembering this one, The Red Wheelbarrow, in English class, and thinking that I had to be missing something. I assumed there were some layers of deep symbolic meaning hidden in there somewhere. Now, I'm older and wiser, and I'm here to tell you that there isn't any hidden meaning here. This is a poem about a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater next to some chickens. Now, here's what I imagine happened in real life. This is just how I picture it. I think it was a warm, rainy day. And when the rain stopped and the sun came out, William Carlos Williams went outside and he saw this image. And it just felt like a perfect, beautiful moment. And Williams wanted to write a poem that would capture that image and that feeling of the moment. That's all. Once I figured out that a poem doesn't have to do any more than that, it took a lot of the pressure off of trying to find hidden meanings in everything. Sometimes a poem just conveys an image, and that's enough. Here's another one: The Great Figure. Among the rain and lights, I saw the figure 5 in gold on a red fire truck, moving, tense, unheeded, to gong clangs, siren howls, and wheels rumbling through the dark city. This is a poem about a fire truck and nothing more. But look at all the different kinds of imagery that Williams works into the poem. He has visuals, lights, rain, gold, red, dark. He has tactile feeling, moving, tense, rumbling. He has sound, gong clang, siren howls. Every line, practically every word of the poem adds something to the overall image. Not a single word is wasted. All right, one more. This is just to say, I have eaten the plums that were in the icebox, and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me, they were delicious, so sweet and so cold. I think this poem is a lot of fun because it's in the form of a note that you might find on the fridge. An apology that's not really an apology, a sorry, not sorry kind of note. And I think this illustrates the other idea that is important to take away from this. Poetry doesn't have to be something that's difficult and high minded that we put on a pedestal that only the most elite writers are allowed to write and read and understand. Anybody can read and write poetry for any occasion. Earlier, I mentioned the Japanese naval officer who stopped and composed a 2-line poem about a cat crossing his path. William Carlos Williams, whose poems I just shared with you, was a medical doctor. And he also happened to write poetry because he enjoyed it. Sometimes people look at these short, simple poems and they think, well, anybody can write that. To which my response is, yes, that's the point. You can write poems like this. You should write poems like this. In fact, I want you to go out and do just that. At the time that I'm recording this, it's a beautiful sunny day. Sometime in the next couple of days or this weekend, I think you should take a notebook outside and sit in the warm sunshine and compose poetry that does nothing more than capture that beautiful moment.